come true to me, to be able to give my youth the experience that I had growing up. I've worked with New Tribes Mission since I was a kid. Well, I didn't work with them, my parents did, but I was along for the ride. And it's such an incredible experience just being exposed to people that are passionate about doing the hard work of going to other countries to tell people about the Lord is just really inspiring. And it's been a dream of mine to share that with my youth. And so, yeah, I'm just so blessed to be able to do that. Right, so today, those of you who don't know me, let me introduce myself first. I'm Matt Pryor. I work with Jess with the youth, obviously. And going to be going through a bit of Romans today. So I'm just kind of carrying on with what has already been taught about, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently since we are doing kind of like a youth-led service today. I'm going to try to give Romans 11 through 32 a bit of a youth spin. So it's going to be kind of like a youth service this morning. We're going to have some videos, we're going to have some small group talks, and hopefully make it a little bit more exciting and engaging for you guys. So pretend that you're a kid, a youth again, and you're easily distracted. For some of you, that might be easier than others. But first, I want to ask you guys a simple question. So I'm sure most of you guys can remember back to when you were in primary school or secondary school, and there was maybe a sport game in PE that they needed two teams, and so they picked two different team leaders to pick the rest of the group, taking turns one at a time until there were two teams. And a lot of the times, they would have one person that was always picked, usually the sporty, athletic kid. He was always picked first, right? And then they would take turns picking all the rest, and it gets down to one last kid, the last one picked. And I think most of us can kind of relate to this. I think at one point in your life, this probably has occurred to you. And so I just want you to think back to when you were younger. For the youth, that's going to be extremely easy because you probably had this happen 3 days ago. But I think for a lot of us, we can really relate to one of those numbers. We can really feel and remember back what that was like. If you're the first one picked, man, that feels good. That feels really good to be the first one picked. But being the last one picked feels awful, absolutely awful. And unfortunately, we can carry kind of our ranking with us our whole life, and it can really develop our character and our personality. When I was a kid, I was actually the last one picked most often for a couple reasons. I was a bit of a socially awkward kid, wasn't really that fun to hang out with. I was a bit weird, a bit annoying. I also was not very sporty or competitive at all. Nothing's changed, really, has it? I wasn't very sporty or competitive, so nobody wanted me on their team because I wouldn't try very hard and it didn't matter to me. So I'd let my team down a lot. So for sports, I would get picked last, but even for like group projects, people didn't want to work with me because I didn't really understand like team dynamics. So I was often picked last, and that can really we can hold on to that and value ourselves because of the things that have happened in the past and value ourselves according to other people. So while you're reminiscing about those childhood memories, I'm going to talk us through Romans 11 through 32. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read it all the way through, one big whack, because it is kind of one continuous thought. So I'll read through it, and then there's kind of 2 points that we'll focus on, because as you probably know, going through Romans, this stuff is very, very dense. So Romans 11 through 32. Again, I ask, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgressions, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgressions means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their fullness bring? I am talking to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles. I make much of my ministry in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people in envy and save some of them. For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part of the dough offered as first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root. Do not boast over those branches. If you do consider this, you do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief. And you stand by faith, do not be arrogant, but be afraid. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut off of an olive tree that is wild by nature, and contrary to nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? I do not want you to be arrogant of this mystery, brothers, so that you may not be, I realize I'm not advancing the slide, conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written. The deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies on your account, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of their patriarchs. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable, just as you, who were at one time disobedient to God, have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound all men over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. So a very dense passage. Apologies for not advancing the slides. But I want to stay focused because there's a lot of stuff that we could kind of dissect and talk about in these passages. There's a lot of even theological debate we might even get into. But this is a youth-run service, so we are going to focus on two main points. And we're going to focus on the main points because I think this is what Paul is intending. The focus that he's wanting is this. The first one is recognizing our value. He's addressing the Gentile church for a couple reasons, but one of them is that they had started to kind of be a little bit boastful of themselves. They started to see themselves a little bit better than the Jewish people because the Jewish people, God's chosen people, had actually rejected the Messiah. And so you can kind of see it as like this balancing act. The Jews had fallen so far from grace, they had rejected the Messiah. The Gentiles hadn't really done anything. It's just that they are now above the Gentiles. So we see this comparison happening just like we did when we were in secondary school of comparing ourselves to the first choice rather than the last choice. And so it's really nothing that the Gentiles are doing. It's just the comparing of how far the Jews have fallen. And I think I want to highlight this one verse, 17 through 18. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those branches. If you do, consider this: you do not support the root, but the root supports you. It's this really, really beautiful analogy, and I'll go into it here in a second, of this engrafting of branches. But Paul is reminding them that the things that you're boasting in, these things that you think make you above the Jews, that's not from you. God has given you these things. So what we're going to do is in your small groups, which in this case it's going to be individual tables or people that are sitting next to you, friends, family, just go over these questions. We'll give you like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then we'll come back. So talk amongst yourself, have fun. 3 questions. Go for it. I'm going to get a drink of water. Okay, guys, if you want to wrap up your conversations, you can continue to talk because we are going to watch a video next. Anybody recognize this video? Anybody seen this video? My lads have seen this video. Sam's shaking his head. I know you've seen this. Your dad was saying he saw it. Hey, that's me. No, they're switching over to the YouTube. Perfect.
Our coverage of the game of the year between Yale and North Carolina.
If you're just joining us, we have witnessed an unbelievably well-fought match tonight, and it's come down to penalty kicks. Peterson for Yale, taking the first approach.
Oh, there it is! Spectacular! North Carolina's goalkeeper Richards just let one in past him now, so now the burden rests on Yale's Scott Sterling.
Here he comes, nerves of steel, that man, dealing with more pressure now than a submarine.
Indeed.
Home crowd showing some appreciation.
Johnson places the ball on the spot, getting ready. That man literally has a cannon for a leg.
Yes, he does.
Here he goes, winding up for the shot, and oh! The cannon has fired and hit Sterling directly to the face.
We clocked that at a stunning 116 kilometers per hour.
Now that's a lot of miles per hour.
Little chance that man's nose is not broken right now.
Oh, indeed. Now, Sterling getting checked out for that one. Spectacular save, though, but sadly, he's not out of the woods yet.
On his feet now, a bit shaken.
But not stirred.
This crowd absolutely loves this man.
And Sterling's teammates welcome him back a hero for now.
Yale's up again for the second attempt, looking to make it 2-0.
He approaches the ball with some determination. Here he goes.
Oh,
Oh!
it's high and wide, way off target.
Yes, apparently he thought he was kicking a field goal.
Wrong kind of football, I'd say.
Good show.
Back now to Scott Sterling. He looks a bit worse for wear, but ready for round two.
And Shaw takes a moment. Here he goes with the approach.
Oh! Sterling with a fantastic dive. The ball flies straight through his hands and once again strikes him straight in the schnoz.
And let's see it again on the old instant replay. Oh, every excruciating detail captured in HD perfection.
Clocked at 129 kilometers per hour. Sterling does not look well.
Two wonderful saves and two definite concussions.
They may replace him at this point. He's done all he can.
Yes, as his trainer takes him off the field like a mustached lion dragging a gazelle through the Serengeti.
Adieu, Scott Sterling.
Adieu.
Yale now with their third PK. Richards is in the goal, bouncing like an infant girl.
The crowd holds their breath as he goes in. Here it comes! Oh! Very anticlimactic.
Let's see who they got to replace Scott
Sterling is back!
He's still in the game!
Oh my! And he's taking a very odd tactic now.
Seems to be curling up to protect his face.
Not exactly a recommended technique, but here it goes. Wait, no. Lampert needs to tie his shoe. Ho-ho! And that's why you do a double knot, kids.
Sterling still waiting for the kick to happen. He's probably wondering when. Oh! Sweet buttered crumpet!
My
The ball drills Sterling right in the face.
That man's nose must be absolutely devastated. He's gonna look like a witch that flew her broom into her nose and then crashed into a hammer.
I hardly even care about this attempt. Let's go back to Scott
Sterling, the man,
the myth, the legend.
3 perfect blocks by Sterling and his cat-like face reflexes.
Absolutely incredible. Though I must say, Sterling does not look well at all.
Well, you know football players like to add a bit of drama, don't they?
They're gonna take him out. No, wait! They brought him a chair!
Oh, a bold move by the manager. Bain sets up for the 4th attempt.
And this, frankly, is a gimme. He literally just has to kick it anywhere except where Sterling is sitting.
There is no possible way that North Carolina can mess up this shot.
Oh!
158 kilometers per hour!
This man can do no wrong!
Look at him beg for mercy when it's mercy that should be begging for him!
He has looked death in the eye and said, take your best shot! To which Death replies by punching him in the face over and over and over again.
If Yale makes this final shot, it's all over. But no! Oh, he misses, which means we're going to Scott Sterling!
His face is like a brick wall!
A brick wall that can feel pain and cries a lot.
But where's Sterling? Oh, he seems to be crawling away from the goal. What is he doing?
He's throwing away the bat! Oh! Sterling has done the impossible!
I can't believe it! Look at that! He played it just right! What incredible instincts to crawl away from the goal like that!
And his teammates rush the field, happy as a lark as they slide in.
A Bernini sculpture of a finish.
As his teammates carry him off on the stretcher of glory. We thank you for sharing this absolutely heart-stopping finish.
Scott Sterling and his face of steel have won it all.
Every single time. Goodness. Well, that is quite a funny video, but it also illustrates my point really well. I was going to get a clip from Shrek, because I find clips from Shrek to be fun, but that one was even funnier than Shrek, so that'll work. So we get Scott Sterling here, who is now this football celebrity, and he's not actually good at football, is he? He's actually pretty bad at it. In fact, at one point, he just sat there and it got hit in the face again. So all of the celebrations that they're celebrating isn't his ability. It's just like bad luck or bad football on the opponent's team. And yet he got the trophy. You know, all of the celebrations he received, and it wasn't even from his own actions. He just got incredibly lucky. And I think oftentimes, and what we see in this passage, Paul is explaining, like, don't boast in things that you wouldn't have if God hadn't have given them to you. We often can sometimes think that, especially in church and even in leadership, we can start to believe that we have a higher knowledge and higher understanding and a tighter relationship with Christ, and it sometimes actually makes it hard for us to relate and understand people that aren't on our level. And Paul is saying that specifically in this passage. That's the specific thing that he's calling out for us here. Nowadays, we can have other things that we have a hard time relating to, and I'll touch on that in a second. But ultimately, as Christians, we do try hard for things. Unlike Sterling here, we do put a lot of effort into it, and we can be really good at ministry. But it's so important that we continue to remember that we wouldn't have those things if God hadn't have provided. So he is ultimately the glory of all of our successes. Here's another key verse. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you also will be cut off, and if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. Which leads me to my second point, which is sharing the same source. We got to be able to have a really, really cool experience seeing missionaries and what they do to train to become missionaries. And as we're around these people this last weekend, there's a lot of different cultures. We had people from Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, Italy, France. And it was so cool to see all those people from all these different cultures, all these different ways of life, all coming together for the same purpose, because we are all part of the same family of God. In this passage, it's talking about engrafting olive branches. Now, some of you are probably way more knowledgeable about planting and making beautiful gardens. I have very little experience with that, but the basic premise to grafting branches is this idea of cutting away a piece of a tree, or in this case, an olive tree, and engrafting one or two more branches that then can actually grow bigger, give more fruit, and have more options for branches in the future so that you can add another engrafted branch. So it's this idea of like growing and prospering out of the same source, which is the key point that Paul makes in the latter half of this passage, is that we're sharing of the same source. So even people that we can't relate to, or maybe people that we might think that we're above, we're both getting the same nutrients. We're the same family. We're all receiving the same gifts from God. And eventually, the olive tree can look something like this. This is a very, very intense olive tree with a lot of branches. But ultimately, when we look at what God has for us, for our future, to go out and tell other people, this is what God wants. He wants many branches, many different types of people, all grafted into the same nutrients, that same source of strength and hope. And that's what these missionaries are training to go and do. They're wanting to bring these people to the one family. So last little small group question, you'll get 1 minute for this. What problems can occur when you start looking down on people who are not as spiritually mature as you, and then why is it important to see people as equal to you? So maybe 1 minute for this, and then I'll wrap up. Okay, guys, if you want to wrap up your conversations, gonna move on. So, some familiar-looking people, but less quality here. When we talk about trying to understand people, seeing people as equal, it's a lot. Some people are easier to understand than others. These people are very easy to understand because we know these people. We know each other. We're part of this church. We love each other. We see each other weekly, if not sometimes daily. I see some of these people daily, and I love it. And so it's very easy to love and to disciple and grow in fellowship with Christ with people that are very familiar to us. But what about people that aren't so familiar? What about people that look way different than us, that sound different than us, that speak a completely different language? Their culture is different. Sometimes when missionaries go into other countries, the culture is so different that you try to show compassion and love to them, but actually those gestures in their culture is actually a sign of aggression. So you have to almost learn a different way of life. And so it's important when we think about God's love and understanding people, and I think seeing people as equal and learning their way of life is the best way that we can start to understand them and sympathize with them. And if you sympathize with someone, you can begin to love them how God loves them. But it's not an easy task. It's difficult, and that's why not very many people do it. And it is a calling. God calls us to be missionaries in our own way, but you can be a missionary wherever you are, wherever God's placed you. You don't necessarily have to go to another country, which was something really interesting that I think we learned on this weekend away, that there is some really extreme callings like going to people like this, but being a missionary could just be talking to your neighbor. Maybe it's a neighbor that you don't like so much, and that's just as much effort, right, sometimes. I'm going to end with this key verse here, which is actually the closer. I'll just read that last little bit. So they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. Just a quick thought, because Israel's obviously not in a great place right now. In this passage, in fact, the entire chapters of Romans going up to Romans 11 is all about Israel and how they are God's chosen people. And this is kind of the finishing passage where it explains that all of Israel will come to salvation. So there is an incredible hope for Israel as well as us in Romans 11. And actually, this is where Paul kind of finishes the discussion on Israel's salvation. Then he moves on to something next, which we'll hear about later on. But what I want to encourage you guys in, and this is my final thoughts, is this quote here. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you, but if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew you never knew. Anybody know where that's from? It is a song, but what song is it? Do you know? Can't remember? Does anybody know? Colors of the Wind by Pocahontas. That's correct. Yeah, girl. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a cool verse to end on. Really, really thankful and glad that we got to go and be a part of New Tribes Mission Training Center. It is an option for people who want to get into missions. It's very affordable. In fact, the Bible school that they do there is free. You just have to pay for board and food. But it's really something that I think people often don't think about. Here's some numbers that we learned over the weekend that was kind of surprising. There are 7,398 unreached people groups in the world, 3.4 billion individual people who haven't even heard of God. Many of them not even heard a single encouraging word. So it's a difficult task to go out and to try to understand people that aren't like us. But I think God calls us to do that for anyone. And it starts with the people you know, but God can also call you to do extremely incredible things like going over to another country. So I'm just going to finish in a word of prayer here. Dear God, thank you so much for all the things you're able to teach us through your word. This amazing analogy of the engrafting of olive branches, God, you've placed there for a reason, to help us understand the the importance of recognizing where our nutrients come from, where our talents and our power come from. God, it's not from us, it's from you. And I pray that you would always remind us of that. You wouldn't let us forget it, God. And I pray that you would encourage everyone here to follow passions, to follow callings, even if it's hard, even if it's difficult, God, because we are all part of the same olive tree, God, and there's so many people, there's so many branches that are waiting to be engrafted into your family. And God, I pray if there's anyone here that has that passion, has that calling, that you provide ways for them to do it, to handle the task, because we know that you will always provide strength to those you've called, God. We just give this time to you. In your name I pray. Amen.